University students are looking at the country's problems and the kind of budget they would draw up. There were two sections. Undergraduate students wrote about blockchain and the regulation and the difficulties in regulating blockchain. The postgraduate students wrote about how a new finance minister would restore credibility in the country and the country's financial system after the ANC's Nasrec conference. I'm joined by both as the two students, one from each of those sections, of course, from our studios in Cape Town. Emily Roberts wrote the undergraduate question about blockchain, and Esther Borsche wrote about the postgraduate essay about fiscal credibility. They join me now. Good evening to you both. Emily, I'm going to start with you about blockchain. There seem to be a very small number of people who understand how blockchain works, and most of the rest of us who have no idea how it works. What kind of problems does this pose for regulators?
So the biggest problem with blockchain is that it's still in the early development stages of its life cycle. And because of this, it's very hard to regulate because it is developing so quickly, and so regulators find it quite difficult to get on top. And because bills take a while to be drafted and approved, it takes a long time before they come in and are approved. And because of this, by that stage, blockchain and cryptocurrencies could have developed so much that regulation would be ineffective. And this is the biggest challenge, I would say.
Do you think our regulators are even trying? And our Reserve Bank has spent some time and money actually looking at the whole issue?
So the main response of regulators, according to my research, is that they've taken a very reactive approach compared to a proactive approach. And this means that they are rather responding to crises or issues happening around cryptocurrency rather than predicting what they could be and putting in steps beforehand.
I mean, one of the issues, as I understand blockchain, and you'll know a lot more about it than I do, but it is a way that you can have units of currency changing hands in a way there is no state regulation at all. In other words, a form of money can move around without the South African Reserve Bank or the Federal Reserve in the States or the Bank of England having any idea of what happens. I mean, how do you even regulate in that kind of environment, especially when you consider how stiff some of our anti-money laundering statutes are now?
Absolutely, and this is the main reason why I don't think that cryptocurrency would become a mainstream form of currency yet. It would take a long time for it to be phased in compared to fiat currency, just because it is so hard to regulate.
Right, Esther Borsche is sitting next to you, and I'd like to look at your essay now, if I can. Esther, I mean, a country like ours has a period of political difficulty over some time. You have a new finance minister, a change of government. Your essay specifically made reference to the period in 2018 was the question. But where does a finance minister start? How do you use a budget speech to restore financial credibility?
I think at the moment what we urgently need to look at is what has deterred investors in the first place, and that speaks to corruption, and that speaks to what has been happening with our SOEs, which we all know very well, and that speaks to unemployment as well. So I think those are the three main factors that he really needs to sort of highlight on and take decisive steps in order to restore that confidence back into the economy.
Do you think a lot has changed in the last year? I mean, on one level it has. On another level, in the last year, we've had three finance ministers. It was Malusi Gigaba who gave the last budget speech last year, just after Cyril Ramaphosa became president, and Nhlanhla Nene was between them. In a way, you think Tito Mboweni actually has almost exactly the same problem that Malusi Gigaba had this time last year about credibility.
That's true, but I think we need to think about moving forward rather than focusing what has happened in the past. So it's true that perhaps we have achieved very minimal results because of that change of positions that has occurred over the years. But we have to sort of forget the past, because what we're concerned about is the future going forward. What do we do with the current standing of the economy?
I mean, one of the issues, of course, is that it's easy for an economist or anyone outside the political realm to say we should do this, we should do that. Politics makes it very difficult. That is something that a finance minister has to really manage very carefully.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
I'm saying a finance minister has to manage politics very carefully. It's not just about money.
Yes.
In some ways, the money is the easy part.
Yes, that's true. There are also people involved. So we should, as I was alluding earlier on, that it's really about weighing the costs and the benefits and seeing which one is overriding in terms of, do we listen to the people's voice, or do we sort of take the difficult decisions that need to be sort of implemented through, and then decide from that point where we're going to move forward to. Yeah.
One of the classic cases is a problem in all democracies where you have an election. It's very difficult for a finance minister to raise taxes just before an election. But if you just look at the numbers from
Absolutely.
what you've been seeing, I mean, do you think we need higher taxes? The other argument, of course, will come that if you raise taxes, you can actually slow down economic development. You suck money out of the economy, and so you slow down any growth.
Yes, I think that speaks to the pros and cons I was speaking about earlier. If we do increase taxes, we'd have to sort of investigate what kind of taxes. Are we looking at VAT increase again? Are we looking at fuel, high tariffs again? So we definitely don't want to get to a point where now revenue is actually decreasing, because that counteracts exactly what we're trying to achieve in the first place. So it's just a matter of trying to manipulate the best way or the most viable taxes where we can actually extract a considerable amount of revenue.
And is there, I mean, from your studies, from what you've seen, you've been watching the situation around the budget, if it were up to you, would you be tempted to break up Eskom, or would you stay away from that political hot potato?
I go for breaking it up. I go for efficiency. I go for isolating these entities and sort of identifying where the inefficiency was coming from in the first place. And then obviously there's the pushback from the trade unions about unemployment. That's the really big one there. But we can always find a way of compromising that. I think that's something that is up for a debate and compromise, yeah.
Esther Bosha, thank you very much indeed. Emily Roberts, thank you. And of course, there are two students taking part in that competition.